Hello and welcome. I am Cy with Things Very Good, and today we are going to be looking at my blood tests from the time I was vegan, and then looking at the most recent blood tests from when I was no longer vegan, which was done in just October of this year, which was about a little less than 2 months ago. So we're going to start with the vegan blood tests. And I took 3 of them. I'm going to do them in chronological order from when I was vegan. And the main things that those covered were just the lipids. So we're only going to go over those. And when we get to, since I've been eating meat and other animal products, I'm going to cover a few more things, but most of it I'm not going to cover, although you're going to be able to see everything because they're going to be in front of you as I'm reading them. And if you want to give me your opinion, or if you know somebody who is an expert that wants to tell me what they think, then I invite you to share with me how you would interpret my blood results. But let's go ahead and get started. We're going to start off with my vegan blood test. And I want to be clear that when I was vegan, this last session of being vegan, it was very strict vegan. It was for 5.5 years. I ate no honey, no dairy, no eggs. I was probably the most strict, or as strict as the most strict person about what I put into my body. Almost never ate out at a restaurant. Always knew the restaurant well enough to know exactly what they put into their foods when I did eat out, but it was like a handful of times. And I mean, this is just a 100% vegan diet, 100% for sure, for 5.5 years. That being said, before I did the 5.5 years of being a strict vegan, I was a vegetarian for about 21 years, right around that amount of time. And for a lot of that time, I was very strict vegan. The story is that every once in a while, my wife and I would have some raw cow's milk or some cream. And that was like usually the extent of what we would have that was the extent of what we would have that wasn't vegan. But those things became more frequent at different times. But for the most part, for much of the time that I was vegetarian, I was vegan. So you could go back to it would have been 18 years as a very, very strict vegetarian, meaning almost always vegan. And so that puts things in perspective for you. Now you're going to go ahead and see these results in front of you, but I'm reading my first. Like I said, these are in chronological order. There's 3 blood tests as a vegan and 1 since I have no longer been vegan. And the total cholesterol as a vegan was 169. And you can see that under 200 is good. So we were good there. And the HDL was 49. That's not super high, but it's in the good reference range. And then my LDL was pretty low at 106, 100 to 129 is the reference range. And then the triglycerides were 68, which is relatively low. And then the ratio for my cholesterol, and in this case it is the total cholesterol divided by the HDL, it's a 3.5. So for a man, 3.4 I think is said to be ideal. Some people say that under that is even better, but I have read from a couple of sources that for a man 3.4 is about ideal. So we're going to go ahead and look at the blood sugar, and the blood sugar was 83, which is normal. So that being said, at that time I did have it was my first ever higher reading of my blood pressure, which was 122/62, and the normal range is 120/80 for your blood pressure. So 122/62, it was just the 2 points over was slightly over normal. And I attributed that to drinking caffeine. I'm not sure if that's what it was, but let's see what happens over time. So we go to my second vegan, the stretch of the 5.5 year vegan, and we're slightly higher in total cholesterol, going up from 169 to 172. And my HDL did go up a little bit to 51, which is good. 106 for the LDL. The triglycerides are 72, and the total cholesterol was a 3.4. So that would be pretty much ideal for a man. So moving, and then my blood pressure went up even a little more to 126 over 84. And that's considered borderline. Nobody's ever been too concerned about it, but it was higher, and it did make me wonder, what am I doing besides drinking about a half a gallon of tea a day with caffeine in it? And that was probably mostly it. And I can tell you why I think that later. But moving on to the third, or my final blood test as a vegan, I went up slightly more in my cholesterol to 177. However, my HDL did go up to 58, putting my ratio down to 3, which, even though it might not be ideal, it was even a lower ratio than before. And ideally, anything under 4.6 is considered desirable. So technically, I guess you could say the lower that you go, the better. And let's see here, I went up even higher for my blood pressure to 132 over 84, which was really surprising to me. They did another check that same time, 134 over 78. So it was higher. And my blood sugar was 82. And if I didn't say the blood sugar for the second test, it was 78. So it was 83, 78, and 82 for those 3 vegan blood sugar tests. So those are all good. Everything checked out good. Cholesterol being as low as mine was really good. And so now we're going to go ahead and move into what changed after, I guess it was probably at least 8 or so months, maybe more, maybe 10 months, maybe even closer to a year. I don't remember exactly, but one way or another, it was a good while into eating different kinds of animal foods. And I have to point out to you that I was consuming a super high amount of cream, which has a relatively high amount of cholesterol in it. It's not super high, it's not as high as butter or eggs, for example, but I was consuming a lot of cholesterol through this time period. So, but I do want to point out that even if you drink a whole cup of cream, heavy whipping cream every day, that's only going to be 80% of your total cholesterol, which I think one egg is something like 64% of your daily cholesterol. So eggs are probably going to be one of the highest sources of cholesterol. Now, looking at the lipid panel from only 2 months ago, my whole or total cholesterol was 206, as you can see, and it says that's high. And then the HDL was 57, triglycerides 99, and then the LDL was 129. And you can see the reference range for the LDL is 0 to 100. So that was changed not too long ago. It might have been several years, but it used to be to 130 was normal. One way or another, you can see the reference range for total cholesterol is 158 to 199. So being at 206, I'm slightly over what's recommended. However, if you break down the percentage or the ratio, I'm at a 3.6, so that's still pretty close to ideal for a man. And I want to point something out too. It was pointed out to me by a number of people that your ratio of triglycerides to HDL is a good indicator of heart health. And mine, you would divide the triglycerides, which in this case is 99, divided by 57, and it's 1.7 something. So that's really pretty good. Anything under 2 is really good. So that is my cholesterol, and there are a lot of doctors that would argue that this is good. And my own doctor said that this is good, and that he said it was good. However, there are some people that will say, and some doctors will say, that higher cholesterol is always bad. And I would say for sure that going from a vegan diet to having any kind of cholesterol in your diet is going to raise it. I don't know if that's bad personally, but that's what I'm sure that it will raise your cholesterol. So we'll move on to the next, and we're not going to go over all of this, like I said, but we'll just take a basic look here. The GLU is the glucose, and I'm 86, so that's really close to what I was as a vegan. Okay, the blood urea nitrogen is 13, which is in the reference range, like right in the middle. Now, the one that was low was the creatinine, but I do want to point out that even though the reference range here is a 0.71 to 1.18, a standard reference range is also 0.6 to 1.2, so that is pretty normal. So my creatinine was barely below the reference range, but my doctor also pointed out that it's normal considering all other things. So he's taking into consideration my overall blood and what this means, and he said that it doesn't mean anything at all. So I thought that was good to know that that is considered normal. And then going down a little bit, we'll just read a couple of the common ones. The calcium, or Ca, 9.4, it's right in the middle of the reference range. Sodium at 137 is in the reference range. The potassium, the K, is at 4.7, which is right in the middle of the reference range. The chloride is in the reference range. The CO2 is in the reference range. And I won't go over the rest of these because I don't want to take up all your time not knowing a lot about. I know what the words are because I looked them all up, but I don't want to go into those in depth because I think somebody else would be better to read those and understand those than I would. So we'll go ahead and move on to the next page. And you can see here, I'm not going to go over this completely, but at the top you'll see the WBC and the RBC, that's the white blood cell and the red blood cell count. Those are both in the reference range. The only thing that was off here is the MPV and the MON percentage A, and that's a monocyte percentage, and the MPV is a mean platelet volume. Okay, so those two things, I guess, only matter if the other blood cell or the other blood information says to look at it as there might be a problem. And according to my doctor, there is absolutely no problem based upon what the rest of my blood looks like. So I'm not worried about it, but you can see 7.3 on the MPV, which is really close to, it's really close to being in the reference range, and then the 9.5 on the monocytes below, and 9.3 is the high part of the reference range. So it's not too high, but I'm not worried about it because my doctor told me I don't need to be. If you want to chime in, if you have some knowledge that you think might be helpful, or if you think that there is something to be concerned about, please let me know. I invite anybody to comment and tell me their opinion. And the last page, the thyroid stimulating hormone. And a 1.67 is what I had, and the reference range is 0.47 to 4.68. So I'm right in the reference range there. Not worried about it. One thing I almost forgot was my blood pressure, my current blood pressure. You can see here it's 64 over 118, which is good. And then you can also see my pulse rate, which is 47, and my body temperature at 98.3 degrees. So all of those looked good, and I wanted you to be able to see those from my most current blood test. All of this being said, I am happy that you took the time to check this out. I really don't want to pretend that I know a lot about what the blood tests say, but I do trust the doctor. I don't usually even call a doctor my doctor, but the doctor I've been seeing lately is an osteopath, and he's a really, really cool person, and I feel like he's a good guy. I trust what he has told me, and I'm going to leave it at that for now. So what do you think? Should I be concerned about my cholesterol going up as somebody who eats animals now and is no longer vegan? Do you think that the ratio is more important? Do you have some specific studies that have shown something different? One last thing I want to leave you with. If you really are wondering about the whole cholesterol idea, I would recommend that you watch this film on Netflix called Fat. And the reason I would recommend that you watch it is because it goes deep into the science of the lipid theory and all about cholesterol and fat, and how the conclusions that the medical society came to, how they came to them. And it's really interesting. I think you might find it interesting. So that being said, thank you so much for watching. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up, and please help me to reach 1,000 subscribers. I am not there yet, and I want to get there as my first goal. So please help me to get there by subscribing right now. And I look forward to seeing you in the next video.